here we go. We're going to start off here. We have our illustrious panel seated and ready to answer any questions and carry on a dialogue with you. What I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of moderate. So, raise your hand if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, and tell me who you're going to.
There we go. Come in that way.
Okay.
I think if you can come in that way.
All right. My wife is a question. Yeah. Okay, for who?
It's going to be guess who, right?
Yeah.
This is a question that a friend of ours who came in earlier today, I believe, asked. And I got thinking about it, and I think it's a valid question. I would like to address it to Colonel Beck first, and then I'd like everyone else's opinion. And if you wouldn't mind if I just record it so that she can hear this. Okay. Thank you. So our friend Jeannie asked a question. With UFOs and craft coming here over so many years, millennia, why are the designs staying the same? And since you have aircraft experience, recent aircraft, I'm sure, Colonel, you've seen aircraft change since you've been flying. Why are these designs still the saucer or the blimp or there seems to be no variation, at least in what I'm hearing. So if you could comment on that.
Well, I'm assuming there are many alien races with different technologies, and once you come up with a design that works, you don't see a need to change. And I, in my humble little brain, the saucer vehicles, something to do with the roundness allows them to possibly direct gravity or cause gravity to pull the ship and change into a interdimension. Once again, I have no idea, but I think once you come up with a design that works, and if there's a lot of ifs here because we don't know. Some of these folks I think know, but if these things are changing over time, it could be a lot of the same vehicles changing in our current time reference, and it could be a lot of the same vehicles. So that would be my answer.
Okay, let's continue on. I'm going to ask everybody to make their comment on this, because we'll have
Can I add to that real quick,
Yeah, of
though,
course.
just 2
Yeah,
seconds?
yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
go ahead.
But in fact, if you look at the facts in the history, there are a number of designs. There are ones that look like a piece of concrete pipe with no appendages, no air, no propulsion units. There are wedge-shaped, diamond-shaped, of course, the saucer shape, globes. So there are a number of different variations. It's not all monotype, the tic-tac, of course. So in fact, there are a number of variants that may not change model years like you're buying a car, but there are differences in them.
Okay, George, would you like to?
Well, there's more than you might think. You can go on some of the websites where they have UFOs, and they'll have a picture of maybe 50 or 60 different shapes. Now, it's interesting that we have pictures drawn in caves allegedly 20,000 years ago that look pretty much like the saucers today. So just like Joe was saying, that they may not change for their own reasons, that's the best shape based on the propulsion system and the anti-gravity system, that it works the best.
Okay, Frank?
I'll share something with you. I have a friend who served both in Afghanistan and also in Iraq. And the woman that he worked with, when he left the service, she stayed in intelligence. And she works for an agency that I can't tell you the name of it, but her responsibility is to airbrush out craft that are coming here from all over. And she's a Christian woman, and she's a single parent, but she said she's not been prepared to see what she's seeing on a daily basis, that she has to airbrush out. And she said there are every conceivable design, shape. It's a myriad of designs. And she said they're coming in or being photographed on satellite, and before they can release the photos, she's got to airbrush them out. And her work is never done.
Thank you, Frank. Jennifer?
Well, I'll just confirm with the rest of the panel, there are multiple shapes. We didn't mention cylinders, like long, long cylinders. One of the things that Will Tompkins talked about is he worked in contracts for the Navy, and a lot of things, craft that we would use, say, for ships that were submarines, what you might think of as a deep sub. Similar craft are like cylinder craft we are building and are going up into outer space, because whatever you would use underwater has to be super airtight, and the similar designs and technology are used to put large, like mother-shaped craft that we're building up in outer space. So I'll also mention that my first sighting that I explained when I presented that I had was a rectangle that was 90 feet long and about 6-7 feet high, and it was a rectangle of light. So we were talking at lunch about what you saw, your sighting. Mine was a rectangle of white, brilliant light, 5:30 in the morning, right outside my bedroom window. It did not light up the tree that it was above. It sat about 5 feet above a tree, and the tree was about 90 feet tall, and its branches had about a 80 to 90 foot breadth. You could put a big rectangle around the tree, or I should say a square around the tree, and this was a rectangle that sat right on top of it. That's how I figured out how big it was. And it was a rectangle of white, undulating, bright light that you might think of like the early screensavers, how they would move when you had a screensaver and you'd get freaked out if you looked at it too long, or my cat would get really freaked out if it was looking at the screensaver. That's what the light was doing, but it was brilliant white light, and I couldn't figure out what it was, but I probably didn't hear about rectangles of white light for 30 years or 35 years after my sighting. So there's all different types of craft that are out there.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, who has another question? Okay, we have Anthony first and then Ed.
For years we've been approached, tracking them, they've taken people, they've chased people, and it always occurred to me that we never really attempted to establish intent. What do they really want? Because some aliens have spoken to people, either at the Colonel Filer's point of view, telepathically or in our own language, but no one's ever gotten to the intent part. Hybridization, they're living among us. What are your thoughts on the intent? Whether they be hostile, they're going to harvest us, what?
My own experiences meeting contactees on the East Coast and West Coast in Europe, they met people who looked just like us, and they said that their intentions were that it's time for us to rejoin our cosmic family. They would say that their forefathers were our forefathers, and it's time for us to join the cosmic family again.
Thank you, Frank. Bruce, you have the next.
Well, in fact, there have been researchers, David Jacobs, for example, was one example, Bud Hopkins, have looked into the question as you have of what's the intent. I don't know that it's a unilateral, even consensus between it. There may be, because there may be a multiple different groups that have made their presence known or are here. There may be a multiple number of reasons why they're here, either for biological experimentation on the dark side. Obviously, if it was to overtake us, that they have the technological capabilities to do that in a minute, and so that hasn't been to this point the intent. But it's hard to discern, and can you say what's the intent of everybody in this room and come up with a uniform answer? No. So I don't know that that's sidestepping the issue, but if you read, Bud Hopkins' work or talk to Peter Robbins about his work along with Bud, Ed Mack has gone into that. It went into that with the children and sighting in Zimbabwe, and so there is a lot of research into that, and I don't know, other than abductees, that they know a unilateral answer.
Jennifer?
I'm sorry.
George, go first.
Well, I met an alien once, and of course this was when I was a child, so they seemed to, from what I could see, wanted to kind of run things, be in control. Well, what they said was that when they took over, but it was a nice thing, it was like when we're here, there will be no more crime. They felt that crime, killing one another in our ways of doing things was wrong, and that they would stop that kind of killing of each other, or of other people and other nations, and that they would help us with medically, so that we wouldn't die of cancer, that kind of thing, and they would help the weather, that the weather wouldn't destroy us due to tornadoes and hurricanes and those kind of things, that they could control the weather. And they could help us environmentally, that their feeling was that we were kind of ruining the planet, which I think if you look around, you can see that we're doing.
What are they waiting for?
Yeah, so,
Actually, now, I will say that I was small and that they made it sound pretty nice to me. But this was also during World War II, that I did, killing people, etc. I don't think is a good way to handle our earth with genocide, etc. Yeah. And the abortions of 1.25 million people a year in our United States, that we have to have better ways of treating each other.
Jennifer?
I would just add to that I think there are probably as many agendas as there are species visiting us. And their agendas relate to their own needs, their evolution, and their physical relationship with us. Some beings are genetically related to us because they can interbreed with us, from what I understand, and some cannot. Some are quite different. So I think if they're here for rare minerals, because we have rare earth minerals which are quite unique and needed in high-tech applications, obviously, you have gold, silver, platinum, things like that. So I think some are here for biological materials, some are here for precious metals, some are here for agendas in terms of, since they also live on the Earth, maybe in under bases or in places like Antarctica or certain places they want to preserve the Earth for themselves. So they're here rendering our nuclear weapons, inert, so that we don't blow up the planet and destroy their bases and their offspring and whatnot that are here. So I think the varied agendas, and of course we can only speculate on the agendas. Like, I don't have a copy of the Galactic document, right? I haven't seen it. But maybe Israel, right? Maybe this top scientist in Israel who spoke about that, maybe some of that material and agendas will start coming out. I'll also just mention that I think they're pretty smart and pretty humble. Like in the Travis Walton story, Travis thinks he just got hit accidentally by a beam of light or electrical charge of some sort that came out of a craft, probably killed him. This beam hit him and threw him about 15 feet. And the other loggers he was with were all in the truck. They took off, of course. And then they stopped to see if the craft was following them, and they saw the craft take off. So they thought, well, we better go back and pick up Travis and get him to the hospital because something's terribly wrong. And of course, Travis was missing, and we all know the story, or most of us know the story. They probably took him to fix him because they didn't want to leave a dead body there. And they felt responsible for what had happened, and it was probably accidental. And the fact that they take our nuclear weapons and render them inert and things like that, I think mostly their agendas have been benevolent. That's my feeling. Do you want to say anything?
I can't argue with the experts here, and I echo everybody's thought, but I also look at the, we all grew up with Star Trek, the prime directive, and I pray that many of those alien species are following that, are they're watchers, they're watching us and trying not to let us kill each other. I pray that continues. So, but I think that's a good thing. There's probably many agendas, and hopefully they're all benevolent. That seemingly that's, for the most part, they're benevolent because they could squash us like a bug, because we are just, we've only been flying airplanes since 1903. So if they're 1 million years ahead of us, wow, who knows? But let's just pray that they're all friendly and trying to take care of us and after our own best future.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ed, I think you were next.
I recently read about the anti-gravity technology that Frank discussed in the book, and the thought propulsion is brand new to me. anti-gravity technology and thought propulsion. How far are we in the future to making that a reality? Number one. Number two, is Russia and China, are Russia and China working on this? And if so, are we ahead of them or what?
If I may, I'm going to jump in here for a second. First of all, anti-gravity, quote unquote, or electrogravitics, whatever you want to call it, has actually been going on for probably 85, 90 years now. It's not a new concept. There's been, in the 1990s, in Russia, they had there was an academy that specializes in that. And they probably were a little bit further along in their experimentation. The key component, as with any type of energy, is you have to approach equilibrium where the amount of energy it takes to do something is commensurate with the energy that you're putting in or taking out. It's that balance point that you have to exceed in order to get that type of reaction. Well, back in 1995, they actually succeeded in getting a 5% return on energy and reducing the weight of an object by a certain percentage, proving the fact that you can do, that there is such a thing as anti-gravity. Now, you mentioned about the Russians and the Chinese. I'm going to say that, according to Jack Sarfati, who Frank mentioned earlier, Jack has been at the forefront of arguing with people about certain things. Gravity, propulsion systems, time and space, even thought propulsion, or being able to travel according to the power of thought, as being a concept of physics that even the CIA has endorsed and has been looking into. So now you can take the work that they've been doing. Jack Sarfati has miles and miles of formula that I wouldn't know one end of that formula from the other if my life depended on it. But the fact of the matter is he has 7 or 8 or 10 people that, including Nobel laureates, a guy named Josephson, that are heavily involved in the conversation, not only about gravitics or anti-gravity or propulsion systems, but also metamaterials. We're talking metamaterials, we're talking things like nanobots, we're talking about a whole new technology. We're talking about materials that could be 1 atom thick and 20 times the strength of steel and 1/6 the weight of steel, that have other properties, electromagnetic properties that are incredible. We're talking thought propulsion. There's something called graphene oxide. Graphene oxide has some very fascinating characteristics, one of which is the electromagnetic capability and the frequency range that it resonates with, which is actually in the microwave range. Now, they're also talking that you can accelerate, and these things can be put into synapses of the brain, the human brain. Okay, and again, think about the ramifications. Think about people that have diseases that are degenerative of the human condition, especially something that originates in the brain or how it works. All of this stuff is on the table. To your last point, the Russians and the Chinese both take this highly seriously, and they're probably further along in some respects because they will put a lot of resources into the esoteric technologies that we're talking about. That's true. You can go out, interesting like engineering. There's all types of articles out there. You go out to academia, you can find tons of articles on this stuff. And it's fascinating. I suggest you go out there and look at it. Okay, I'm going to take it over.
I'd like to address your question. When Dr. Sarfati sent me these 24 pages of equations saying that metallurgy and awareness and consciousness can all be integrated for thought propulsion, I sent an email back to him. I said, Dr. Sarfati, is this the method that the star visitors are using to traverse the galaxy or vast distances to come here and visit us? He said, absolutely. He said, we could back engineer what they have. We just are not yet at the point where we could align atoms the way they do, okay? And regarding Russia and China, Scott Jones, C.B. Scott Jones, who was a science advisor for one of the senators, and his name escapes me at the moment. He's got a tremendous background in military strategy. He did a complete reversal and shift away from defensive and militaristic tendencies and did a shift more towards benefiting mankind. And he's had meetings with 2 different groups of visitors. He shared with Bill Tompkins and myself that when he would go and collect information in China and in Russia, he said when he would go there, they would pull him aside and showed them the back engineering they were doing on craft. So, as Joe mentioned, you know, they're not laggards in this.
Anybody else? Bruce?
Well, if I just let me backstep for a second. I want to throw a concept out that I've done a considerable amount of research, and I have a couple very intelligent friends who have written books on this. But back to the motivation, I would suggest, and there are a number of religious and belief-based organizations, not the least of which be the Mormons, or if you go to in the Christian tradition, the Bible. Is it not plausible the Watchers, which were described in the book of Genesis, and also the Mormons believe that John Smith, you know, talked to a being from off planet, could we not have been colonized? Does this not explain the RH factor? Does this not explain a lot of things that we're unable to explain in science any more unlikely than us saying we're going to go to Mars and colonize Mars or another planet? So I just want to throw that out as possible. Maybe the Watchers are the visitors coming back to keep an eye on us based on what, you know, if they're trying to help us without intervention from blowing ourselves up, I think it's pretty much time to ring the dinner bell and say, you know, hey, things aren't going real well right now. How about a little help? But that being all kidding aside, just think about that. And there's a lot of good research on that. And I think there's a lot of good anecdotal evidence or documented evidence that would sustain that as being a plausible option of what's going on here. I just want to throw that out for your thoughts going forward. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else like to comment? Joe, Jennifer, George?
Well, I don't know. Well, essentially, I was told they were, you know, coming here to help us in a general way. Another thing they said to us that there's stuff about apes and monkeys that you're not a monkey. Our ancestors are them. They came here, you know, many years ago, and I'd say brought humans with them, and that apes are still apes and monkeys are still monkeys, and we're not.
There's no missing link.
Okay, I think
No missing
I'll
link.
just add one little thing too, since I was a student of Zechariah Sitchin's and read most of his work and had many long discussions with him about this as well. In his books, he talks about the Anunnaki and the Nephilim. These are biblical terms you will see in the Bible. The Anunnaki were a group of beings that came here, most likely, according to the Sumerian records, for precious metals, exactly what I was saying before, because they needed them back on their home planet, and they knew Earth actually had quite a bit of them. So the first missions they sent here were reconnaissance missions with, you know, small groups, small teams of people for precious metals. Then they needed to set up more like mining operations and have larger groups that came here. And there's biblical stories about this as well. They call them, they call the beings that came here the Nephilim. Now in Hebrew, Nephil means to like descend, literally go down a flight of stairs. It's a verb, right? And the way things are conjugated in Hebrew is there's like suffixes and prefixes that go on to the word. So Nephilim means plural of those that descended. So it means the group that descended from above. And the biblical stories state that the Nephilim descended from above, were here, were like us, and they found women attractive, and they decided to mate with women. And that's how the human species that we are today came about, because there was mating that went on. Now, also according to the Sumerian scripts, there was advanced civilization here 10,000 years ago that was destroyed. Now we know that there have been major cataclysms that have gone on. We don't really understand what some of them were. There are like evidence in South America where there's all these pyramids of the Mayans and the Aztecs, but those civilizations just seem to disappear. We don't know what happened to them. The buildings are still there, but what happened to the people? Was it disease? Was it famine? Or, as Robert Schoch believes, and it's pertinent to be here, it was a massive coronal, discharge that happened, and people were literally radiated, and they died, either within days or weeks or years or months because of the radiation that they were exposed to, and they weren't, protected from it. So it's quite interesting that the Earth may have had many different groups interbreeding with us. Our makeup, our physical makeup, with our head and our brain and our 2 arms and legs and 10 fingers and 10 toes, could be a major structure that exists in many other planets. Just like, say, when you go into the bottom of the ocean, or you go out into the ocean and you look at marine life. A lot of marine life, although there's a lot of different type of fish, they all seem to have gills and they all seem to have fins, but there's just a lot of different types of them. So we could have been interbreeding with various species for a long, long time. The Earth's civilizations could have been through series of evolution and devolution going on. And we know very, very little about our history, and it's sort of kept from us, because if we knew the bigger, deeper history, we would be much harder to control. And I think that this is all related, and I agree with some of the other speakers who have said the UFO phenomenon, really digesting it and really understanding it emotionally, spiritually, telepathically, however you're going to relate to it, if you can begin to wrap your brain around this and chew on it, it's the biggest story facing mankind. And it's one we are going to have to face as a species. So the sooner we begin to do it as individuals, we'll help those people around us to begin to digest and chew on this. And we won't maybe go into the chaos or the shock or whatever that will happen when this becomes more mainstream. So I just wanted to congratulate Joe for doing this type of conference, because people learn one by one. Just like anything else in life, right? It's a learning experience. You learn by the mistakes you've made, and you learn by what you haven't understood. And then when you finally get to understand it, it changes the way you go forward in your life. And it takes bravery too. This is not an easy topic to really come to terms with. And you're going to face ridicule and so whatnot. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Jan. Anthony, I think you had a question, and then whoever else, just raise your hands and go ahead, Anthony.
You don't have to be an empirical genius to look at the solar system and say our planet is the nicest piece of real estate out of all the planets, okay? And Paul Hellyer, the late Paul Hellyer once said he believed there's 58 different species of alien visiting the planet, okay? So, okay, you can make the case for they're looking at, like the Anunnaki, they're looking for gold, because you need gold for spaceflight, okay? Or they're looking for this or that. But the question becomes, I don't think there's 58 species, and if there are, why would they be going to Pluto or Saturn, okay? What makes us so special? Is it just the fact that we have the nicest third rock from the sun? Or is it more than that, all right? Because it seems like if there are 58 different species visiting the planet, what's the common denominator for all those species? Because when you look at, how man evolved, and it's a known fact, DNA did not originate on this planet. So
Supernova.
58 different species didn't have DNA indigenous to us, okay? So it seems like there's a concentration on Earth, at least in this solar system, that we know of, why they're coming here. And, it dawned upon me that, well, if I had a spaceship and I could be George Jetson and just get in my spaceship and go visit Saturn, or I could go visit Pluto, the reason becomes, well, why? Well, they have minerals that they want to mine. okay? Or I want to go see, you know, a type of volcano on another planet or an ecosystem. But it seems that we have more to offer, okay? But why would 58 different species want to glean what we have?
If I could just jump in here for a second. Okay, first of all, DNA is something that permeates the entire universe. And it was actually, they just discovered, or it was just published, that when you have a supernova, the supernova is the genesis of our DNA. And it permeates the entire universe, known universe. So that's one thing. The other question that you had, I find intriguing because you could probably look at each and every planet in our solar system, and you can find a wealth of minerals on all of them. I think what makes us somewhat unique, maybe now, but maybe not in past history, is the fact that we have everything. Right now, everything here, we have the blue marble. We're described in glowing terms just from the view from space, what we look like. And I think that we have all the mineral wealth that you can think of, except maybe helium-3. That's on the moon, though. The genetic mix of all the life on Earth, plant, animal, and everything, is probably biodiverse, as you can imagine, in our solar system. And our solar system may not be the most unique solar system in the known universe, or even in our own galaxy. So it becomes a magnet. And it's almost like, I think Lori likes using the term watering hole. And if it's brought 58 different species, potentially, together at this place, we are the watering hole. We have that biodiversity. We have mineral wealth. And we also have youth. Okay? Our age is so young that all the mistakes that the other societies may have made, they can say, are we doing the same thing? I'm going to say we're probably doing it in spades. We're getting ready to blow ourselves off the face of the earth. And maybe that's the reason they're here. You know, they want to kind of steer us gently away from that. So that's kind of the way I see this. I'd like to turn
I was going to make a quick comment. The Nordics told Bill Tompkins, and the contactees I met said that our planet glows like a gem. It really is the blue marble. And it radiates and draws the interest of all these other star travelers because it is so radiant, and they are drawn here. And those that have come here, some of the Nordics said that some of the visitors who come here, they said it's like going to the circus.
Yeah.
They said coming here
like a
is,
train wreck.
yeah.
It's kind of like a train wreck, I
Some of
think.
the things they see down here.
It's like a Far Side cartoon for the cosmos. It really is. It's like, are these people real? Sorry, I couldn't get it. I couldn't read it.
Yeah, I'll just add too. We probably, from what I've understood, I've known Linda Howe for a long time, and she's also been told this, you know, in secret bases actually, that there are multiple species that have been coming here, but there's really only 5 main ones that have specific agendas here. But we have tracked 58 different species, which we have been in contact with, or we've seen, or we've observed, or there's abduction stories of them. And I don't think we are actually that unique. I think there are many planets they stop at. You saw in my presentation, there's upwards of 500 million possible inhabitable, you know, planets when you take into consideration the size of the known universe that we know. So this may just be a stopping off point. This might be just like Houston, or this might just be like, you know, Phoenix or LA, and it may be one of many stops that they're making. So we may not really be that unique.
George?
Yeah, well, he told me that we had the nicest planet in this part of the universe. But I don't know if you noticed, at MUFON and met a lot of abductees. And abductees feel that, or at least some feel, that they're watching us because we're amusing. They enjoy us, that we have more emotion than the average alien, if that makes sense to you. That we're more exciting, more more interesting to watch for nothing else. It's almost like going to the zoo. You go to see the most interesting animals. It's kind of like they come and see us. We're one of the most interesting group of animals in this part of the galaxy. And the term watchers is what they frequently do. They watch us all the time.
It's kind of like pouring honey in an ant farm, you know, watching what goes on. I think we're just the rest stop on the way to Alpha Centauri, and the toilets aren't all that clean, but at least you get some entertainment along with it. I don't know, maybe. Sorry, it's too much radio.
They're probably watching today.
Yeah, we're always on the big screen.
I think they want to come and channel surf between CNN and Fox News.
Okay, going on.
Okay, so.
Identify yourself.
Yeah, I'm Chris Goes from Newton, New Jersey.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
My sighting happened at a CE5 event. It was not organized by Dr. Stephen Greer. It was another organization. I saw this, it was in Pine Bush, New York. And they have a yearly UFO fair up in Pine Bush. And this was a few years ago, and this CE5 event was after that street fair. So anyway, I went to this CE5 event, and what happened was there was a bunch of people on this hillside, and we're looking at the stars, and it was very nice. And then an owl hooted 3 times.
Ow.
And then the orb appeared. I mean, we couldn't see if it was a crowd, but the orb appeared, it went across the sky, and it flashed, and it flashed, and it flashed. So everyone saw this, and then it dimmed out. So then, you know, everyone applauded, wow, we saw a UFO. But after that event, everyone was talking about that owl.
Yeah.
It was, oh yeah, we saw a craft. But how about that owl? Can you believe that? And for me personally, I was going to this UFO fair, but I was a little shy about sitting with 50 people, or who knows how many people, on the side of the hill at night. But I knew this event was going on. I said, I'll put a lawn chair in the car. Yeah, I really don't think I'm going to do this. I don't think I'm going to go there. But I'll put a jacket in the car just in case. And then, well, I don't think I want to stay out that late on a Saturday night, you know. Yeah, just in case, you know, I won't do anything Sunday morning. And then when I was driving home, I realized that I was led there because I kind of really didn't want to go. But all these things happened, like, yeah, I'll put a lawn chair in the car. You know, I was somehow being enabled to go there, and then I felt like there was a lot of consciousness going through here. And there was like some kind of consciousness going through my mind to bring me to this place. And since I was there by myself, before that owl hooted, I felt really cold. So I went to the car and I got a jacket, and when I came back, this girl said, oh, look at that. And then I saw it, and I was in front of the group, and then after it was done, I said, wow, yay! And then everyone started to clap. And then I started to think, like, maybe I was led there to be the cheerleader to, you know, do a cheer for this thing. And I never heard that out because I was at my car, but it was so weird that I got back there at the exact time when this thing appeared, and then I just let out the cheer.
Was the owl significant in alerting or awakening the UFO? Three
It
hoots?
was like the owl was announcing the UFO.
Okay.
But I didn't even hear the owl because I went to my car for this jacket. But I just bring this up because I really felt like when I rewound the whole thing, I really felt that there was a consciousness, like, and something that brought me there. So I don't know about your sightings, but
Okay, I think Jen Stein might have some insight.
Well,
She's shaking her head.
I'm over here just. We are sharing that consciousness right now. The thrill and excitement and freedom that you feel being in this room where we can discuss this without judgment and with recognition is hugely important. So I will encourage you to continue to seek people out and to read books and to go to conferences. I've spoken many times at the Pine Bush Conference. Travis has come in many times. We screened the film up there. There are many little tiny conferences around the country, McMinnville, Roswell. There's one in Exeter, New Hampshire, that the local Kiwanis Club puts on, and they raise money to buy coats for kids and for domestic violence centers and whatever. They give the money away every year to a local charity in the community. But the Kiwanis Club has a UFO conference in Exeter, New Hampshire, because Exeter is a very famous UFO story that happened there. Actually, the incident at Exeter. Sure, I think it's a follow from the Roswell, because after the Roswell incident, they closed the Roswell Army Air Base. They renamed it the Walker.
Well, it was Walker at first.
Oh, it was
and then
Walker at
became-
first.
It was Walker Army Air Base in the 40s.
In the 40s, right.
And then it became Roswell.
And then it became Roswell. But even after Roswell, I think they changed the name again, and they moved the 509th Bomb Squad out of there, and they moved it, I think, to Exeter, New Hampshire, and the UFO phenomenon followed them. So, yes, it is a matter of consciousness. There are CE5 events that go on, but you don't need to be part of Stephen Greer's group to do it. And I think if a lot of people get together and have a conscious desire to reach out and communicate and vector in craft and just see craft, it can happen. I will tell you, I had an experience sighting, sort of like someone else described here, like your sighting you had in the aircraft, like large pop-up of light all of a sudden appearing in the sky. And I was on my way to speak at one of Paula Harris's UFO conferences. And I was driving across Central Florida. She had a conference at a hotel at a racetrack when the racetrack was closed, because she could get the hotel rooms for like $40 a night or something, so people could all come in and we could have a 3-4 day conference there. So I'm on my way driving across the central panhandle of Florida. It's pitch black outside. There's nothing but farmlands around me, and sure enough, all of a sudden in the sky I see this light start to pop on, and I think it's like a weird star because it wasn't there in the sky before, and it's like orange. All of a sudden it gets super, super, super big, like a full moon on the horizon. It gets really bright, then it goes back out, blinks back to the size of a star, and then pops out. And I'm like, what was that? Then it happens again, just off to the right. You're like, boom, really big. I mean, it looked like a jetliner coming in for a landing in front of me. The thing was so close, and then that blinks out, then another one blinks up over here, then all of a sudden a whole bunch of them blink on and dance around. I was so excited. I couldn't pull off the road. I'm digging in my purse for my phone to take a picture. I'm like, there's no shoulder on the road, and I'm only about 1.5 miles, and my navigation system is talking to me saying, straight ahead through the next light. So I pull into the lobby, or actually I pull into the parking lot of this hotel. Don't you know there's 15, 20 people standing outside with drinks that they're holding from the bar, and they're all like looking up, and looking. Somebody was walking back from a local 7-Eleven where they went to buy themselves snacks, her and her husband, and they saw it. And they ran inside, told everybody at the bar, everybody ran outside. I pull in, roll down my window and say, did anybody just see those? I was going to tell them what I saw right away. I said, did anybody see those, orange things, fly in the sky? And they went, oh yeah, we just saw it. Well, there were 6 sightings that weekend. Like, people kept going out from the conference and going up and standing and looking, and there were like all different sorts of things happening in the sky. So like-minded people asking and looking, you just might be surprised for what happens. Like they always say, be careful what you wish for. You know?
The consciousness.
Oh, consciousness is
Does
huge.
that permeate the universe?
Yes, I think so. Did any of you bounce your voice off the moon here? Okay, well, you know how long that took, 6 seconds?
No, 2.25.
Oh, 2.25 seconds. 2.5 seconds, your voice can go from here to the moon and back. Your thoughts go instantaneously, and there's no division of time and space for your thoughts. Edgar Mitchell wrote a book about that. Do you know he was doing experiments, consciousness experiments, when he came back from the moon? It's like psychic experiments. Really, really incredible. Sending mental thoughts. So your consciousness is so powerful. It's limitless. Do not ignore it. Continue to pay attention to it. You are a force field in the universe, not just on this planet.
Okay, I think we have a thread going here about Pine Bush. Let me throw a wrinkle at you. First of all, Dr. Bruce Cornett spent 12 years studying Pine Bush very scientifically. I mean, he used every piece of scientific equipment you could get your hands on. And he has written a book about it. The data that's in there is phenomenal. He was also working with Linda
Howe?
No.
Linda Zimmerman.
Linda Zimmerman, right. She passed away a couple of years ago.
No, she's still alive.
No, she
Linda
passed away.
Zimmerman? No, I
At
don't.
least that's what Bruce told me.
I don't think so, because MUFON just called me and asked me for her number, and I just emailed with her. So, Linda Zimmerman.
we have a mystery
Linda
here.
Zimmerman's written a number of books all about the
Okay.
Hudson Flat.
All right.
Maybe she's a ghostwriter.
mention
She might be a ghostwriter.
Okay, I will withdraw
Yeah.
my erroneous statement. However, the point that I was going on to make was Bruce did a lot of work scientifically, but also researching the area very well. There is a special operations airfield that, since the BRAC, base realignment and closure, shut down, but there used to be a lot of very, very interesting air activity that used to take place there. Also, interestingly, one of the people that I came across at MUFON a number of years ago lives in a portion of Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, and he's had numerous sightings of objects. But if you draw a beeline over his house and take it from Indiantown Gap, it goes straight up into Pine Bush. Now, the reason I throw that out, Indiantown Gap is a major National Guard facility specializing in helicopter operations, all types of helicopter operations. But it also was mentioned by a young man that was he was a 20 and out warrior, okay, one of the Space Command, before there was a Space Command. And his training, his boot camp training, he said, took place at Indiantown Gap. So I'm throwing this out because it's a mystery surrounded by a mystery and part of an enigma, okay? Now, all the other things are also definitely in scope and should be considered, but consider that as well because it adds to the mystery. So become investigators yourself and look beyond the obvious at that moment. There's a synergy and there's a synchronicity to everything that happens, including UFO activity. If you spend 20 years paying attention to an area, you might find some phenomenal things. We have it right here in Monmouth County. Okay, so I throw that out. Now I'm going to turn it back over to the illustrious panel to comment on Pine Bush from whatever perspective they want to take.
I used to go up to Pine Bush with Bruce. Matter of fact, he used to come on a TV program, and he used to be on my TV program in Atlantic City
That's Bruce Cornett.
fairly regularly. Another thing I want to bring up is that, he feels his wife was an alien. But also, what I've run into, and I'd like you to think about, is that there's, I believe, a religious aspect to this. And then almost every religion talks about heaven or some other word, but it essentially means heaven. And it talks about angels. I don't know if you're aware of it, but angels' books are more frequently written than UFO books. Well, I've known a lot of pastors who actually were saved by angels in various situations. But if you listen closely, the angels have the same description as the Nordics and can do almost the same things. They can go through walls, they can fly, they can do a lot of things. The pictures with angels with wings on them, I don't think means they actually have the wings. They have the ability to fly. They can, from here, go right out through that wall.
Yeah.
Another thing that's happened to me is, for example, my brother died, and when he died, he was at the bottom of the stairs, and they called the ambulance. The ambulance took him to the hospital, and at the hospital, he's watching the doctors work on him and so forth, and he came back alive. But he basically said he, saw the light, went to heaven, etc. That I think there's a connection that the Bible tells us that essentially we don't die, that if we're good, you might say, or believe in Jesus, we go to heaven. Well, how do you get to heaven? Well, I think maybe these ships have something to do with it. And there's quite a few books that Wendell Stevens wrote and so on that had to do with angels and starships, etc., that I think there's an aspect to this. And if you look at the Bible and what you know about UFOs and read the passages all through the Bible, there's discussions of UFOs and of different important people in the Bible coming back from heaven to the earth and so on, the transformation, etc. There's various ones that there's indication that you live past, when you actually die. And I feel that that's quite possible, that our soul goes on and we go somewhere and maybe even come back someday.
I'll comment while Bruce is taking the mic that many people, I've been to a near-death experiencers conference. They had one right in King of Prussia about 2 years ago, and a whole film crew set up for that. I think we called you if you wanted to work that one. What's really interesting is that I thought I was at a UFO conference like half the time, because these people who had near-death experiences had regressions, right? They did hypnosis to get into what happened to them. Many of them came back from this experience with extreme psychic abilities. So this taps right back in to consciousness, how consciousness expands, or your ability to take in more information mentally, psychically, emotionally, tends to increase with things like near-death experiences and ET contact or even UFO craft contact. I know that what happened to me when I had this sighting is I suddenly had the ability to perceive things and know things, like my precognitive abilities sped up very quickly. And it was important that I had this experience when I was 19, because my father promptly died after that, and then came and spoke to me and told me that he was dying and asked me to come to the hospital, which I did, and he had died. And then he communicated this whole long list of things to me. And I found out later that my father told me he went to everyone else in the family, and I'm the only one that showed up in the hospital room, right? And so when I saw him, he was in a room with 4 other people. No one knew he had gone. I think they thought he was snoring. So I pulled the curtain around him. This was 1977. People didn't talk much about near-death experiences and whatnot. Now, he'd died and come back to life 3 times before he officially left. And when he did, he shared those experiences with me. So I ran out and I bought Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book, who was just experimentally writing on this in the 70s, and I gave it to him, and we started to really share. So my dad and I, my dad was 50 when I was born, so he was almost the same age as my grandfather. So there was a lot of disconnect from me when I was growing up with my dad. And I don't mean to go off on this tangent, but the basic point is, my dad was able to communicate with me. I showed up, went to his bedside, knew he was dying, pulled the curtain around him. No one else in the room knew he was dead. They thought I was just in there maybe praying with him or sitting with him. And he downloaded all this information to me, which I knew, well, there was stuff I didn't know about. He'd been married before, there was stuff in the safe deposit box, there was information he wanted me to give my mom, and like, there weren't any other children to know about, but it was like really intense stuff I was just learning about, and I thought, oh, this is really weird. Sure enough, nurse comes in, pulls the curtain back, realizes he's dead, and then all the other people in the room realize he's dead. And my father couldn't communicate with me anymore because the static energy and disconnect or the discomfort the other people had in the room that he was dead and I was in there with him, well, what was I doing with him, right? Or, I shouldn't be in there with a dead body. It was weird. Like, it felt like the room filled up with static and he couldn't reach me anymore. So I go out to the nurse's stand and I call my family. My sister answers the phone, and instead of answering the phone with her business that she had, it was a store we had in the local town, she answered and said, "He's dead, isn't he?" She knew. She knew it was me calling. He had been there. She saw him, but she didn't trust herself. So she didn't come to the hospital. So I know that my UFO sighting expanded my ability to be able to be present for my father and help him transmute or transition through this life. And then to reach back out to me and say, my father said to me, "You're awake. You came. Nobody else in the family came. You saw me. You heard me. Don't go back to sleep." He kept saying to me, "You're awake. Don't go back to sleep. Don't deny that this happened." It's very easy to just brush stuff aside. But if you keep your awareness like al dente, like pasta, right? You have to cook it every day. You have to work with it every day. It's like a skill, like a muscle. You have to exercise every day. Trust it, work with it. It will guide you. It will lead you. It will protect you. And it will help you help other people. I can't tell you how many times I had premonitions of car accidents and I was able to avoid them. Or I knew they were going to happen and I was in them and I got out and I pulled everybody out of the car before a tractor trailer smashed into the car we were in. Just stay present with your consciousness and let it guide you, and it will guide you. So that's what I have to share.
All right, any other questions?
Oh, wait, I think Bruce had something to share.
Well, I don't know if you want me to go. If I may, if you indulge me, and we'll get to you. But I got into this field when I was a 21-year-old student in New Mexico and got a part-time just as a shtick for CBS Network. I was the youngest anchorman in the CBS Network doing the late-night news in Roswell, New Mexico, Friday and Saturday nights, 2 years before anybody heard of it. And I was in journalism up in Portales at Eastern New Mexico University. We never heard of any flying saucers at Roswell. Nothing was before Berliner and Stanton and all the rest of them showed up. I was approached by a guy one night. It's a very long story, but what I want to suggest to you, one of the most amazing men I ever met, and it's hard to get his book because Jim's never promoted it. A good friend of mine, he was a science teacher. He's truly a Renaissance man. He's one of the most well-researched men I've ever met. He is truly a Renaissance guy in many areas. He wrote a book called Pilgrims and Strangers on the Earth about 25 years ago. Lynn Moulton Howe wrote the foreword to it. It is an analysis through the Bible from day one with the concept of maybe, unless it was an allegory or a proverb or something to explain a concept, that the Bible explained real-life instances, very highly technical and very highly supernormal, with people that were non-technical. He went through and from as we said, the Nephilim, the Watchers, the analysis that he did in terms of, if you folks have ever heard of the Book of Enoch or the apocryphal books, which were thrown out after the Council of Nicaea in 300 AD, but are real scripts that were found. Fascinating looks. Enoch the scribe talked about being taken up in the heavens and being shown things. The point I'm making, and this is a change for me after literally investigating various areas, primarily UFOs, but also a lot of paranormal stuff. I've been on a number of shows from Bruce Tango from Ghost Hunters there. I've been on My Ghost Story, Ghost Soldiers, I've been on numerous, because I'm a broadcast engineer, the nuts and bolts electronic investigation of the paranormal events. And I have to tell you, there's a growing movement of this siloed investigative mindset is now expanding to say, maybe a lot of these things are connected. Maybe they aren't disparate activities that we're investigating. We talk about consciousness. You know, I've read and I've accumulated over the last 40 years everything I can possibly find in writing that Nikola Tesla wrote, or speeches, comments, interviews, that wasn't taken by the FBI and Donald Trump's grandfather in 1944. No, he was one. He was in there. He was one of the guys that. You were in the FBI, so you know. Hey, that's right. So the point I'm making is, Tesla said he invented nothing, and frankly, it's ironic we're here because Tesla, had that fist fight basically with Thomas Edison, but he also was awarded the patent for the radio, not Marconi. Marconi stole about 7 of his devices to make it. Sorry, but that's the way it is. But that being said, he said he never invented anything. He was given this information at night from the ether, he called it. If you look at the many of the Native American tribes, and I lived in the Southwest, if you look at the Hopi, the Kachina Dolls, everybody's familiar with them? They don't have, the tops of their heads don't look that way. They said they are depictions of the Star Brothers that came and told them how to live peaceably on the earth. They kind of look like maybe helmets and space suits to me. If you go to the Aztec, in the depictions down in Mexico of the guy sitting back with the flames coming out of the back of the rocket ship. The point I'm making is, from Edgar Cayce to the Hindus, the Catholic Church held catechism as part of its ritual until, again, the Council of Nicaea, and it was kicked out. Reincarnation has been documented. I've interviewed over the last 40 years a doctor, a trauma surgeon from United Kingdom, who left his practice to document reincarnation and near-death experience, documented. And there's been a number of programs on about children with reincarnation. My point is this: maybe it's all connected. Maybe this, and I'm getting way far afield, but the sad part is that, and this started with our friends in the CIA and some of the manipulation and the control factor, the snicker factor. I never got into that class. I must have missed it in college. But I got to tell you something. For 30 years, you could never say any of this stuff because I was in television news. I was a documentary producer. They'd laugh you right out of the room. I mean, they literally would insult you and call you names. And it's a shame that something so important to who we are, where we are, the question we all ask, what are we doing here, what's this all about, has been not only suppressed, but totally avoided for so many agendas that, I think we need to not limit ourselves in scope, if you will, if you're of a mind, of only thinking about, as I'm akin to do as a pilot, the nuts and bolts. There's so much beyond that. Precognition. SRI and the remote viewer programs, that's real. That happened. The Russians did it. We did it. I met Joe McMoneagle, and these things are real. Edgar Cayce, there's no way to dispute what he was able to do. So many people I worked for about a year on the show, Psychic Detectives on A&E. It's the most remarkable thing you could ever imagine. When you have prosecutors and chief of police and saying, hey, look, I don't know how this works, but this woman solved a 20-year-old crime. How do you explain these type of things? Forgive me for getting far afield, but to me, I don't have enough time in the day, and I have to unfortunately put food on the table to explore all there is. Speaking of Jack Sarfati, your presentation today is mind-boggling about what is working in the black budget and off-budget arena. And so I would just encourage anybody that's interested, as I've told so many people that have the smart remarks, oh, do you believe in UFOs? Well, it's not a belief system. Spend more than 5 minutes, investigate, you know, they use some discernment on what's real and what isn't. You know, take everything that's on YouTube being more accurate. But it's far beyond just siloing everything in the nuts and bolts. Where did it land? Where's the imprints from the pods and so on? And I think, if you will, if you take that away from here, as well as the detail that all these folks have shared with you, it'll be a day worth investing in. And I am very privileged to be on this panel with you guys, because you've got such amazing experiences. We all have something to share. Sorry.
Okay, identify yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Jane Barron. So much crossover synchronicity happening, it's just like boggling my brain. My brother-in-law works for SRI, so I'm
All right. Hope I didn't mean human.
Drag through the mud.
so I'm all around the Princeton information and the brain think tanks and all that goes. You've written a book that is a vanity publication, so you'll never see it, but it's all about reincarnation and actually through a centrifugal process. So anyway, I wanted to ask, sort of to encapsulate about, we're talking about individual expansion and consciousness, awareness, and growth within individual people. Now, the UFOs presenting themselves to us as a method of letting us know they're there, to sort of wake us up and go, okay, we're here, how do we interact, you know, what do you want to do with us? How are you going to interact with us? How can we help you grow? You mentioned the Galactic Federation before. Among the people who have seen in flight what's going on here, and those of us who have seen, you know, visually on the ground, things going on, what do you think is the purpose at this point for the military in their observation of what's happening and what they're going to do with this knowledge now going forward, and whether or not you think the Black Ops have Galactic Federation contact going on? And, you know, we hear things about, you know, civilization on the other side of the moon, we just don't see, you know, all that. So is there I know that's oversweeping kind of question, but is there leaking information that you're hearing about interactions with Galactic Federation?
Can I?
Through the military?
Frank?
A friend of mine who's a physicist, I asked him, who's pushing the agenda? Is it the government? Is it the military? Is it intel agencies? Is it corporations? Who's pushing the agenda? He said, Frank, let me call you back in 24 hours. He called me back 24 hours. He said, guess who's pushing the agenda? Guess. They are. And Colonel Ware said, Frank, 80% of the people that have the ability of blocking this have green lighted it. And he said the other 20% are receding very quickly.
So the fear is dropping away in the presence of
It's just they can't hold back the dawn.
I'll just add, Rich Dolan has written a great book, 20th Century Mind, I think UFOs in the 20th Century Mind, and he goes into what is the Breakaway Society that most likely has existed for the last 40 years. This is groups of people who do travel off planet, do work in underground bases, do travel back and forth between Mars or the moon or whatever, are part of this 20 and Back program where they have regeneration technologies. I suspect that we are about to go through some major evolutionary steps, and I've also been told by Linda Moulton Howe and others that the agendas that happen here on Earth, all the wars that you see, all the, I think, viruses that you see and things like that are partially organized by an agenda that's not our agenda. Now, I don't know what that means in terms of what is the agenda. A lot of people are afraid there is a depopulation agenda going on. I don't know how to answer that. I just have to say you got to keep your eyes and ears open. You got to keep your ear to the ground. You got to stay in touch with your intuition, your psychic awareness, and trust it.
Yeah, thank you. And George, would you like to comment?
I would just like to throw this out real quick. Is it possible, and this is a scary thought, what's going on right now worldwide? What's being thrown about in the terminology, the reset, the global reset, the economy, everything about everything, it's certainly in this country, that I grew up with is changed and changing more rapidly. Is there a possibility this is part of an agenda that goes far beyond what's going on terrestrially and maybe not driven by that? I mean, that's a pretty heavy thought, and maybe it's far beyond governments and so forth.
Okay, let me just add something to this. I was trying to think of how to drag in Monmouth County and try to give you a flavor of something that happened starting in 1958, actually in Colts Neck, which is a couple of miles from here. When I was a kid, I'm not going to go into the whole story, I'm just going to hit the highlights of it because I think that's what's important. And I think ultimately when you see the overall picture, it'll shed some more light on what we're talking about right now, about the agendas and everything else. In 1958, I was a kid growing up on a farm that's now a county park. And that farm is adjacent to what was known as the Navy Road, or Normandy Road, if you're a Navy fan. Earl, and it was NAD Earl, Naval Ammunition Depot Earl in 1958. Now it's Naval Weapons Station Earl, don't ask me what the difference is, other than the fact that in 1997 they got rid of all the nukes. And they stored nukes there until 1997. And all the locals, we always knew what was going on, what was moving on that private road, because they would have squads of armed Marines blocking the crossroads, of which there were 5 of them between Colts Neck and Leonardo, which is where the Navy Pier is, the longest finger pier in the world, right? 2.5 miles long. Well, anyway, that particular event, what I saw was a daylight sphere. It was about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, so it's still daylight, but it was after sundown. And it was lazily flying along the Navy Road at an altitude of maybe 200-300 feet. And it was probably about 60 feet in diameter. Now, a kid, I'm a 10-year-old kid at the time, but my parents had seen it. Everybody that lived on the farm that was outside that night saw it because we saw it flying across the road. So my father goes running into the house, and he makes a phone call trying to get through to Fort Monmouth. The switchboard was jammed, right? So he said, okay, now I'm a kid. I'm not paying that much attention to it. But nothing ever came out in the newspapers. Now, the interesting thing, I bring up 1958. That was the summer of 1958. In May of 1958, there were 2 things that happened with Nike Ajax. Nike Ajax was the first generation surface-to-air missile that was spread throughout the country protecting against Soviet bombers. It was a conventional warhead, had a range of about 32 miles. So what happened was, in Washington, it was Whiskey 93, which was the battery that had the missiles. They were having 2 weeks of UFO activity. And this came from the Disclosure Project, of which I believe George was on the panel the day when Harlan Bentley, who was a radar operator for the Army at that Nike site, an object crashed and left debris that turned out to be radioactive. So years later, he divulges that, but that's May of 1958. Hold the date. May 22nd, 1958, alongside the Navy Road, there was New York 53, which is another Nike Ajax battery that was protecting Bell Labs, the Navy Pier, Fort Hancock, and Fort Monmouth. What happened was the worst accident in Nike history took place at that site. It blew up, the entire battery blew up, killing 10 people, 6 soldiers and 4 DoD civilians. That was May 22nd, 1958. July of 1958, we had the UFO activity, which I thought was unique, but it turns out it wasn't unique at all, that they had a lot of activity that was on that road. A lot of reports were made, and the one report that caught my eye, actually caught my wife's eye, in 1970, there was the Courier is a weekly newspaper in Middletown, and they had a big article along with photographs and everything else of the remnants of a landing about 1.5 miles from the Navy Pier in a swampy area of Port Monmouth, not Fort Monmouth, but Port Monmouth. That was 1970. Now, the other interesting thing, New York 56 is another Nike site, but this was a Nike Hercules site. We had 24 nuclear-armed Nike Hercules missiles there until 1974. The summer of 1970, it was July of 1970 when that UFO landed, and they had the photographic evidence, they had scientists coming in there investigating it, the police chief reported and everything, big to do. Anyway, with the gentleman that's the head of the Nike New York 56 volunteer organization, a 501c3, he was the launch section chief of launch section A. There were 4 launch sections that made up New York 56. The only time that he was stationed there at New York 56, Fort Hancock, Gateway National Park now, that they actually armed those nuclear warheads for flight and anger was the summer of 1970. Now that battery is only 7 miles, driving miles, from where that UFO landed, but there were also numerous UFOs along that Navy road over the years. And I got that from some of the people that were doing the investigations. Now, fast forward again to 2002. In Colts Neck, on Doorbrook Park, which was Doorbrook Farm, which is where I grew up and where I had my sighting, a crop circle showed up, and the Asbury Park Press had an aerial photograph, and they took a big thing. It was just behind my house, where my house used to be, which they tore down in 2002 as well. So I'm talking about the synchronicity. I'm talking about these events taking place over the span of how many years? That takes it up to 2002. Well, there's more stuff that's still going on. In this area, right over Earl, you can still see things flying over there, and they're still being reported. But they don't really get it, newspapers don't do a lot with them, unfortunately. But anyway, I digress. I'm going to leave it at that, but you have that picture, you have the flavor of that. Yes,
I was just
Anthony.
going to say, to Bruce's point about the agenda, right? It's been going on for quite some time. I mean, the event that just comes out in my mind is the incident at Fatima with the 3 children seeing the Blessed Virgin, right? Now, the Catholic Church told you it was a religious event, the sun wasn't falling, you know, blah, 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 blah. Ufologists will tell you, no, it was a UFO event, but ironically, a few months later, the world was hit with the Spanish flu, and it took 50 million people. So that agenda has always been going on. It's not now. It's continuing, okay? But I really believe that the comments that the panel made are correct. It's still going to continue until it reaches a ending or a goal that it's supposed to do, okay? I mean, if you look at astrology, we're in the age of Aquarius now, okay, blah, 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 and I follow that. But the interesting thing is mankind is set up for a major overhaul, okay, of what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to live, okay? The joke in the Catholic Church is God always corrects the mistakes of one pope by creating another pope, okay? But now you got Francis, you know, saying, he's, you know, when was the last time a pope talked about we're all responsible? You know, we're killing the planet. You know, it was always geared towards the teachings and the doctrines of the Catholic Church, but now he's taking the real macro view, and that is what's really happening, okay? So it's ever going to happen, all right? It's another rung on the ladder of evolution that's supposed to happen, and nobody knows where it's going to end. But you can actually see, you know, I for one don't dismiss the fact that COVID wasn't an alien-induced, you know, virus. Who knows? What was the Spanish flu? What was blah, 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 right? Okay? So I really think that we're all on a major learning curve here, but it's not over, and it's been happening for a long, long time. It just hasn't hit its crescendo.
Exactly.
I actually have a comment to add to that, if it's okay. Have any of you heard of the name of Carol Rosin? She's a wonderful woman. She spoke at some of the citizen hearings that took place. She also was part of some of Stephen Greer's press conference. that he ran numerous times at the National Press Club. Briefly, Carol Rosin was, I think she has some physics background. She worked in aerospace, and she was, for a while, assigned to be an assistant of von Braun. What's his first name? Werner, thank you. I can only think of Eric. Werner von Braun. So Werner von Braun was our rocket scientist that came as part of the paperclip expedition. When he became much older and basically close to his deathbed, he divulged to Carol, and she has carried this story forward, that there was an agenda that was going to unfold. I think he told her this in the 70s, right around the time when you're talking about. And he told her about various world wars that were going to take place, wars in the Middle East. He told her about, just numerous things that were going to happen. One of the last things he told her would happen is we would have a false flag agenda. We would be told that we were being invaded, but in fact we were not being invaded, and they would be trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. And he wanted her to know all this stuff, and he also urged her to try to dedicate her life to getting like beam technology weapons and nuclear weapons out of space, that we not deploy these weapons in space. And this is what Scott's book was about. What's his first name?
Scott Jones.
Yeah, Scott Jones also wrote a book along with Carol Rosin. Carol got a lot of top military people to write a book with her. She also started an agency or a group or a nonprofit organization which is called Space Treaty, Peace and Space Treaties. I did some film work for Carol. So I think it's really important to continue to dig and research and stay aware, because you're absolutely right on. There could be some important things going on, and if you understand the backside or the underside. I'm Jewish, and I have studied a lot of Jewish mysticism and things like that. And in Jewish mysticism, they always say that more of the universe is hidden than is revealed. So you always need to kind of like pick up the rock and look at the underside if you really want to know what's going on in the world. You can't just look at the one side of reality. You always have to look at the underside as well, and that side is even more important than the side that we can see. So I'll just share that.
They say, I've heard several people in the energy studies sphere talk about the expansion of the coronavirus and the expansion of the corona. So they are coinciding.
Very quickly, two things. If you don't think there's a major change going on here, who would have ever thought in the last 50 years you would hear the Catholic Church saying, hey, we think, there's life elsewhere in the universe. That was, whoa, really, that would get you burned at the stake when I was a kid. I'm not Catholic, but I was like, whoa, man, that guy's going down. And the most powerful terrestrial telescope on the planet is run by the Jesuits. And forgive me, and this is, forgive my cynicism, but are they looking for Jesus to come back? What are they watching out there? Why are the Jesuits involved in that? That's just a rhetorical, far-side joke, but
105-acre city-state, okay, need an observatory.
right. What are they looking
It's
for?
right there. I've been there. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Okay. And you
The
say
one
to
in the
yourself,
Vatican or the one in Arizona?
No,
No,
they have
they
one
have
on,
one
they have one on campus too. So
Yeah.
it's just a small.
No, they have one at the
They have a
Vatican.
reflector at the Vatican.
And you say to yourself, everything that they preach with doctrine and dogma, it's so far removed from what they don't walk their talk, is what I'm saying, right? Why do you need priests who are scientists, okay, watching the heavens? And they asked Francis, and they said, what would you do if aliens landed at the Vatican, tomorrow? You know what he said? He said, I'd invite them into the church and ask them if they want to be baptized. They're God's creatures. So
But the word that has come out over the years, and the feature films and so forth set aside, the Vatican Library probably has a lot of things that we would all like to know, which will never be let out. So that's part of the, that's what shows you this is just like an experiment gone bad, because that is the human failing of greed, of control, of exploitation, of manipulation. Whether it's major corporations or the 12 ruling banking families or multinational corporations, whatever you want to deem it, there's a lot of people that would like to get the leg up on all us worker bees, and that's been going on since the Native Americans were bagging the tribe next to them and slaughtering those people. They weren't utopian kumbaya people. They were at each other's throats too, because that's kind of human nature. And I don't know how we get it. That's so deep in our DNA, in our instincts, that survival, kill the guy next to you and get his food. I don't know how we ever flush that out of the system, really. We just have a more high-tech way of expressing that, I think, and we get more sophisticated on the results.
Evolution, happens, and you were talking about the gamma field having an effect on our DNA and our expansion. Sure. So the movement with consciousness is from competition toward cooperation. So there is so much more available in a cooperative environment than a competitive one. It just takes getting past the fear of self,
losing your piece of the action.
and understanding if you give, you get back to that or that's been able to,
I mean, to sum it up, we all have front row seats. There's not a damn thing we can do about it. It's just going to happen, regardless of what we think or do.
Well, you can only control what
you can control
in your sphere of influence.
Okay, I'm going to ring the 5-minute bell.
Okay.
So
Can I say one final thing?
yes, Lori.
So we have recently, this is all very fascinating and very interesting and mind expanding, because I am a skeptic. Although I have a master's degree in theology, and I am solidly based as much as possible in the physics that I understand, that I apply when I use the radio telescope. But recently, we have installed this little monitor on top of the solar system that plays a video that shows the comparison in distances in what we understand in our own universe. And this is massive. And our existence as human beings is like a daylily that has 24 hours or much less. So we're so concerned with our lives, aren't we? And our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives. And we think in terms of generations and of consciousness expansion. We're come and gone like that.
Flicker.
So when we think about this journey toward consciousness and cooperation, and folks, we are, we're moving fast. If you're trying to run before you, we're moving so quickly compared to the age of this thing called existence that we're aware of with solid physics. We know this, we don't have a lot of time really to get to where we're going, and we're going from fighting with one another to a cooperative way of understanding ourselves with consciousness. So it is, Bruce is right, it is, and Jennifer, a personal decision to cooperate,
Right.
to begin to cooperate. And I think that that's probably the most powerful thing that we are learning if we are being visited by other, and having these experiences. I just think that's the whole reason. We really do need to learn how to cooperate with one another and get along.
Our friends upstairs say, be aware of what's going on, but do not allow any of this to block you from moving forward. Right. Be aware of it, but don't let it block you from moving forward. Continue to move forward.
Jennifer?
Thank you.
I just wanted to alert you to something that might be of interest to you. in a week from today, I'm involved in running an interesting international virtual conference for Travis Walton. It will be the anniversary of his November 5th, 1975 sighting, and if any of you want to tune into it, actually, if you register, I think by today, today's the 30th, if you register today or tonight, it's $10. And it's all day. And it's going to start, it's on a Pacific Coast-based time. It's going to start at 8 a.m. their time, which is like 11 a.m. our time, and it'll probably go till 11 p.m. our time. We have a whole expert of panels that are going to be on. We have a filmmakers panel that will be online. You'll be able to ask questions and interact with people. It's literally an interactive virtual conference. And I think it might be quite interesting. So to sign up, I actually have some cards over here with this picture on it, which have the website for the film. It's called TravisWaltonTheMovie.com. If you go there and you go to Skyfire Summit, you'll get a link and you can register right away. But some people might want to tune into that.
Also, if you all, when you checked in today, you registered your email address. So I will send out to everybody that's on that list Jennifer's information about the conference and all.
Yeah, well, I should also mention, I have cards over there, yellow cards, Mainline MUFON. I also have the brochure in the back, Mainline MUFON. If you go there, just go to the website, Mainline MUFON, and you look for videos, you can click on that, and it'll be like maybe 60 programs we have filmed like this, like little mini conferences. I was doing them once a month at my public library for 20 years. Good friend of mine and I videotaped them and put them to YouTube. So you can watch evening lectures like this. So each lecture is about an hour and a half, and there are people in this field who have spoken for our local community for a long time. Some of the stuff is on like precognition, some of it is on, psychic phenomenon, a lot of it is on UFOs, some of it's on life after death experiences, but they're really quite fascinating things. One is a Carol Bowman who speaks about children's past lives. And amazingly, some of these have gotten upwards of 1 million hits online too. So that they're free, they're there for you to watch. Just want to let you know.
Okay, thank you. Everybody make a brief statement closing out, and I'll make the last statement.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to share with you today. It's always a joy and honor to share information, and I would offer this to you. Please don't accept everything that I've shared as absolute. Let it come into your consciousness, put it in the back burner of your thinking, and that you may find it'll help you to bridge from one concept to another. Because the things and the people that I've met have helped me to find that everything ties itself together beautifully, and there's no question marks. So hopefully you'll find that too.
Okay, thank you, Frank. George?
Well, I've been an intelligence officer my whole life, and I'd like to warn you, communist countries hate us and are trying to destroy us. And they're attempting to destroy us by bio-warfare, the coronavirus, by fires and damage to our country and our trade. And just keep it in mind that a lot of bad things are going on, even in our schools, etc. There's a lot of Marxist teaching going on, and you might even want to watch the democratic message they're putting out, that they seem to be going towards communism as well. And if you doubt that, I encourage you to read what they put out from their Democratic Party manifesto. And you'll find that it's almost word for word of the 1936 Communist Manifesto written by Stalin. After that was written in 1936, Stalin killed some 40 million people. There's bad things happening in the world.
Bruce?
I would I have been very blessed for almost 50 years to work in this industry. I have worked in almost every phase of it, from network sports for 12 years, which was bizarre. I'm not a sports guy, but paid the bills and got me to meet a lot of people. I worked in feature films early on for about 11 years. Documentaries, as I said, and I've traveled all over the world and met people, and I found that in my documentaries, as I'm sure you will agree, it's about the people, not necessarily the stories. The stories are a vehicle to tell what makes us different, and everybody has a unique story to tell, and I've been very blessed. And I'm telling you, not in a patronizing way, I just met you, but anybody that does 30,000 hours in the cockpit without bending anything is pretty damn good in my book. So, as a pilot that likes to bounce them in 2 or 3 times, these are the most honorable people, the most intelligent people, Joe included, of course, that I've ever had the pleasure to work with, and I'm honored to be up here. And I want to thank you folks for taking the time to spend some time with us and listen to what we have to say. I've told people for 40 years, don't believe what I'm saying as being gospel any more than you would believe anybody else. But please, I hope it opens your mind or lights a fire to go look and use some discernment, use your own intelligence, your own intuition, and you'll see that there's a lot of positive things out there. But I would also mirror what George has said about we're in a very perilous time right now. In my lifetime, I've never seen anything like it. And I think things can really go sideways quickly. You can only change what you change in your sphere of influence, but try to be a positive force in that, always. And I think that that's what we have to strive for. And I'm very grateful that I was able to be here today, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce.
I'm just in awe of everybody I've met today, and very thankful for everything I've heard from everybody and the sharing, and I want to thank you for all the work that you've done and you're continuing to work. I hope I can continue to help with this a little bit in the many jobs I have, but it's a blessing for you guys getting the word out, and maybe that's what the plan is, for this to be brought out slowly for the masses, because the masses, the majority of the masses don't, they don't take this seriously. So I thank you for everything you're doing, and it's an honor. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, John. Okay, and I'd like to thank all of you for being here and being so supportive, and all the support I've gotten from Lori and Carl, and
And your wife?
Yeah, my wife too. But
Wife and daughter.
Will and Dave. Okay.
Yeah, folks, you should know that we have a little team of docents over at ISEC. And,
That's right. This wouldn't have happened without them.
All the way in the back, who set up all the savings.
Thanks to everybody, especially everybody on the